你他妈的，你
我第一次见他的时候
Set in an animal market in China. The story begins by introducing a gangster boss named Gou, who controls the entire area. At that moment, Gou happens to be carrying a dog he plans to sell. Among the many dog sellers there, Gou approaches a young man named Dongzi, who has only been selling in the market for 2 days. Unaware that Gou is the local thug who controls the area, Dongji appears indifferent and fails to provide proper service.
知道我是谁吗？这个是我抵债抵回来的狗，6万。
虎头毛短。
According to Gou, the dog belonged to one of his debtor, as a way to settle a debt, the debtor claimed, that the dog was expensive. However, Dongzin, who was more knowledgeable about the dog trade, offered a low price, after realizing that the dog was just an ordinary old dog with little value.
你他妈埋汰谁呢？我5万块钱给他卖出去，你信不信？我这瞎嘚瑟，500。埋汰狗呢？
Curious to find out who was right and who was wrong, Gou brought Dongzin to meet the debtor, in person, located at an entertainment venue. Gou met with the debtor, who turned out to be a young man, to confirm the breed of the dog.
哎，哥，
好，我撕
欠条都撕了。
还钱。
In the end, it was revealed that the dog was indeed just an ordinary dog with little value. The debtor had deliberately lied because he had no money to repay his debt. Just as Gou was about to beat him up, one of the young man's father's subordinates, who just happened to work at the entertainment venue, showed up. So,
捏着嗓子也得他妈还钱。
没我事了吧？
feeling emboldened by the number of men on his side, the debtor confidently approached Dongzin, trying to force him to admit that the dog was actually worth a lot. However, knowing full well that the dog was just an ordinary low-value mutt, Dongzin stood firm in his stance until finally.
你他妈的，你我就打死他！
Yes, a fight broke out between Dongzin, alone, and a group of thugs. It turned out that Dongzin was a brave young man who would not tolerate being disrespected. Meanwhile, Gou just sat and watched as Dongzin was brutally ganged up on by the thugs. Seeing Dongzin getting overwhelmed, only then did Gou step in and punched the debtor right in the face. And despite his old age, Gou turned out to still be skilled in combat. He was even able to make use of the objects around him. All the thugs were taken down by just Gou and Dongzin, but just as they were catching their breath and thought everything was over, it turned out that
我再聊一会儿，他们就怂了，不用动。
seeing the newly arrived gang of thugs outnumbered them, Dongzin pushed Gou to the front, but here they are now, sitting in the clinic with bandaged, bleeding heads. They had to pay for medical treatment, and since Dongzin didn't have any money, Gou ended up paying for both of them. After returning from the clinic, Gou visited his fellow gangster friend, Sanjay, to play mahjong at Sanjay's gambling den. However, not long after, a guest arrived, asking to meet with Sanjay. The guest seemed to have an important and serious matter to discuss in private.
得把这药费挣出来。
As Sangay brought his guest into a private room, Dongzin showed up to repay the medical expenses that Gou had covered earlier. But at the same moment, Sangay looked quite shocked when he realized who his guest really was. A police officer who had actually come to request drugs.
还有多少？我都要了，洗干净的现金。
Because Sangay is a tough person, he refused to give it. As a result, the police officer was forced to deploy his entire unit to raid the place. As the tension began to rise, Dongzin, who was quite knave, casually asked for permission to leave, claiming that he had no involvement with any of them. And yes, Dongzin was eventually arrested and taken to the police station after boldly beating up the police captain. As a result, the search plan was cancelled because the captain was already frustrated with Dongjin's behavior.
收队。
接着玩，接着玩啊！
打警察。
我刚认识了一兄弟，
脑子不太好，这个。
And you'll be quite surprised to find out who Dongzin really is. Yes, it turns out he is an undercover cop, assigned to investigate the drug business allegedly run by Sanji and his mafia group. Interestingly, Dongzin is not from the Narcotics or Intelligence Division. Instead, he comes from the Police K9 Training Unit, chosen because he fit the criteria needed for this undercover mission.
冠军，冠军，
准备准备，去看守所了。来。
2 weeks passed after Dongzin pretended to be imprisoned. He was finally released, and immediately picked up by Gou, who brought him home. There, Dongzin was welcomed by Gou's wife, who had already prepared a meal, and they sat down to eat together.
火候是很重要的。
我瞅你上火，吃这个吧，你打烙吧。
During the meal, Gou praised Dongzin's courage for daring to punch a police captain in front of everyone. Essentially, Gou wanted to invite Dongzin to become his work partner, and without hesitation, Dongzin immediately agreed.
你叫我一声狗哥。
我们这伙人的头，但是他见我也是应该的。是我兄弟，东子。
Dongzin's first job was to accompany Gou in collecting debts from various debtors. At first, Gou was confident, as he kicked the door open, but
妈的，钱还不上！我上个厕所。哎呦！
once again, they ended up at the clinic, with their heads bandaged. But this time, it was Dongzin who had to pay for the medical expenses, because Gou didn't have any money.
别想动一根手指头，不能忽悠我，得跟我说。
One day, Gou and Dongzin attended the funeral of Chairman Gay, the leader of their organization, who had been murdered by an unknown assailant. Gou expressed his sorrow by weeping in front of the chairman's only child, Liu, a young man whom Gou had come to regard as his own nephew.
没事吧？
Gou explained that their organization was divided into 2 factions. One belonged to Sangay, the owner of the mahjong gambling den, and the other to Uncle Long, who managed upper-middle-class businesses. Gou himself was part of Sanjay's side, as they were still considered to be among the lower-ranking underlings.
哥，
Not long after, Uncle Long arrived, with his men, to offer condolences and promised to find out who was behind the murder of the leader. Uncle Long also expressed his suspicion that the killer might be among them, subtly accusing Sanji of being the perpetrator.
爹的死很蹊跷，
是吧，三儿？
别嘚瑟行吗？
That night, Gou had a private conversation with Sangay to discuss the earlier incident where Uncle Long had accused Sangay of being the one behind the chairman's murder. Sangay firmly denied any involvement in the death of the chairman. Until suddenly, Uncle Long's men appeared with the intention of launching an attack. And this is what happened. Just as the two sides were fiercely brawling inside, Uncle Long, who was waiting outside, was suddenly approached by an unknown person, riding a motorcycle. The person stopped right next to Uncle Long's car, and without saying a word, pulled out a pistol. And yes, Uncle Long was shot dead by an unknown assailant, who was most likely the same person responsible for the chairman's murder. Once it was confirmed that Sangay had nothing to do with the incident, the troops eventually dispersed, and the tension came to an end, then and there. A few weeks had passed since Sanjay officially took over all the businesses previously managed by Uncle Long. Meanwhile, Gou and Dongzi had grown closer. One day, while they were having a meal together at home, Dongzi accidentally noticed injection marks on Gou's wife's arm, who, as it turned out, was a former drug addict, now fully recovered.
这都是因为这事儿，你怀不上孩子。来来。
After finishing their meal, Dongzi asked Gou why he didn't just leave and start a better life. Gou, who was actually a good person at heart, truly wanted to leave. But he felt that he had already gone too deep. The only way out, he believed, was death.
只有一条路，那就是死。
After leaving Gou's house, Dongzi secretly met with the police captain to discuss the progress of his investigation. The main goal of this undercover mission was to uncover suspected drug trafficking operations carried out by the group. The reason Dongzi approached Gou was because Gou was seen as a lone wolf, a neutral party who did not side with any particular faction. Following the death of the former leader, leadership had now been taken over by Liu, his only son. With Uncle Long dead, Liu was expected to appoint Sangay to oversee all field operations. This meant that Gou would inevitably be involved in some of the group's more hidden businesses. That, in turn, provided Dongzi with a valuable opportunity to get closer to the core of his undercover mission.
猫着点儿，知道了。
For that reason, Dongzi began taking his pet dog everywhere. Unbeknownst to Gou, the dog was actually a trained sniffer, capable of detecting and tracking drugs.
去，走走。不咋了？有急事儿，上车。哪儿来的狗啊？寻思一样。随便吧。
As expected, Sanjay eventually assigned a special task to Gou, retrieving a package from a designated location. Although the contents of the package were not clearly stated, Gou accepted the job without hesitation. To prevent any outside communication, both of their phones were confiscated, strongly suggesting that the item they were tasked to retrieve was in fact drugs. Because Dongzin's phone had been confiscated, he began trying to figure out a way to contact the police captain. At one point, he pretended to ask for a bathroom break. But Gou told him to just pee in a bottle instead. It wasn't for nothing. Gou suspected that Sanjay had sent someone to follow them from behind. To avoid raising Sanjay's suspicions, they couldn't afford to stop the car. While Gou was paying the toll fee, Dongzin finally found an opportunity to contact the police captain by using his pet dog to deliver a piece of paper to the toll booth attendant. The note contained instructions for the captain to come immediately to the location where the package was to be picked up. Dongjin and Gou had arrived at the pickup location, where stacks of boxes were piled high, contents unknown. To investigate further, Dongzin discreetly deployed his trained sniffer dog. Just as the captain and his team were preparing to launch the raid, but Dongzin was stunned to discover that there were no drugs in any of the boxes. Realizing this, he quickly released his dog, sending a secret signal to abort the operation before it was too late. Upon returning to the base, Sangay opened one of the boxes, only to find it was filled with nothing but detergent packages. So, what was the meaning behind all this? It turned out that Sanjay had started to suspect there might be an undercover cop among them. The recent delivery was merely a trap, intended to mislead the police. Dongzin began to feel uneasy when he was suddenly asked, "You're not a cop, are you?"
你是警察?
Sangha then offered a real job, retrieving a package that this time actually contained drugs. However, Gou declined the offer in his usual joking manner. Meanwhile, Sangay showed interest in Dongzin's sniffer dog and ended up taking it with him.
走进这边。
After meeting with Sangay, Gou and Dongzin went to a hot spring to relax. There, Gao finally opened up about the real reason he turned down Sangay's job offer. He revealed that his wife had once been a drug addict, and the process of overcoming the addiction had been incredibly difficult, requiring a long time and a lot of patience. That's why, whenever there's a joy involving drugs, Gou chooses to walk away. It's not because he doesn't need the money, but because the risks are far too great. And he wants no part in that kind of trouble. After that, Dongzin informed the captain about Sanjay's offer. The captain immediately ordered him to accept it. Armed with a small communication device given by the captain, Dongzin had no choice but to go through with it, for the sake of the success of his undercover mission. The next morning, Gao was quite surprised to hear that Dongzin was interested in accepting the job offer from Sangay, claiming he needed some extra money. Gao tried to convince him to just go home and not get involved in such dangerous work. But what was Dongzin's response?
走了。
Yes, Dongzin was forced to hit Gao on the head with a bottle to prevent him from interfering with the plan. Deep down, Dongzin felt reluctant to do it. But in order to gain Sanji's trust, he had no other choice. On the day of the pickup, while all of Sanji's men were busy with preparations, Dongzin secretly contacted the police captain to get ready and head to the pickup location. Upon receiving the message, the captain and his team immediately prepared and set out for the location. Located beneath the bridge, Dongzin and Sanji's men received a message from the seller, instructing them to dig at the base of a specific numbered pillar. Meanwhile, the captain was already in position, ready to launch the raid as soon as the evidence was in plain sight. All all of Sanji's men immediately panicked when the police arrived at the scene, leading to an intense shootout. Meanwhile, Dongzin tried to stop one of Sanji's trusted men who was attempting to escape. As a result, one of Sanjay's men accidentally discovered that Dongzin was carrying a communication device inside his jacket. Since he had already been exposed, Dongzin had no choice but to take him down. And unexpectedly, Gou arrived at the scene to make sure that Dongzin was safe. Sanjay's trusted man immediately tried to tell him that Dongzin was actually an undercover cop. However, since Gou had come to see Dongzin as a brother, he chose to trust him instead, taking Dongzin away and leaving Sanjay's right-hand man lying there, critically injured. Gou then took Dongzin to his home to give him a stern lecture, reminding him of the warnings he had given earlier. Unlike Dongzin, who was focused solely on completing his undercover mission, Gou saw their relationship as something more than just professional, because he genuinely cared about Dongzin. Gou gave him a sum of money, urging him to leave the city and start a new life far away from the dark world they were entangled in. Just as Dongzin was about to leave, Liu's men suddenly appeared and came to take both of them back to the headquarters. Upon arriving at the location, Gou and Dongzin found Sanjay and Liu enjoying a meal. However, their behavior seemed suspicious, as if they already knew something secret.
来口水，哎，尝尝，谢谢谢。哦，这是啥意思啊？
Without saying much, Sanjay showed Dongzin's drug-sniffing dog, effectively revealing Dongzin's true identity. In other words, his undercover mission had been exposed because of the detection dog. With no excuse left to cover himself, Dongzin fell silent as Sanjay shot the dog. Meanwhile, Gou still couldn't believe that Dongzin was a police officer. Gou took Dongzin away, desperately begging for his life to be spared. But
我就叫唤啊！你们让我咬谁，我就口出求救。
Sanjay handed a gun to Gou and ordered him to shoot Dongzin in the head. But guess what Gou did instead?
回去。
Yes, Gou ended up shooting Sanjay and took Liu hostage in order to escape from the place. Out of deep care for Dongzin, Gou was willing to take such a desperate risk, even if it meant putting his own life on the line, by going up against Liu's dozens of men, just as Gou released Liu near the stairwell. Suddenly,
有一直想奔进去。不是。
Fortunately, their escape was aided by the captain of the police, who arrived at the scene. While the thugs were busy exchanging gunfire with the police, Gou and Dongzin were chased by Liu and his bodyguard, both armed with firearms. And this is what happened. While Gou was busy dealing with Liu, Dongzin had to face Liu's formidable assistant. In the intense fight, the assistant managed to strangle Dongzin with a cable, until finally... Seeing that Dongzin was in desperate need of help, Gou, with a broken piece of a box cutter blade still lodged in his chest, immediately slammed Liu hard. Even as Liu attacked him from behind, Gou kept trying, desperately, to cut the cable, to save Dongzin, and Gou managed to bring Liu down by stabbing him in the stomach with a sharp object. However, just as Gou and Dongzi were about to leave, Liu suddenly got back up and fired a shot, causing Gou's fate was truly tragic, as he lay dying, shot by Liu from behind. After everything Dongzi had been through, he finally realized that Gou was not a bad person. Gou was just an ordinary middle-aged man, trying to make a living for his wife. He had no involvement in the drug trade, and had only become a victim of the mission Dongzi was carrying out. Sometime after Gou's death, Dongzi visited Gou's now empty house. After his wife had moved back to her hometown, Dongzi came simply to pay his respects to the late Gou, who had played a significant role in the success of his mission. But his heart shattered the moment he accidentally discovered a hidden communication device inside a drawer, because it turned out that yes, it turned out that on the night they were picked up by Liu's men, Dongzi had, unknowingly, dropped his communication device. And that was how Gou eventually discovered that Dongzi was actually an undercover police officer. So then, why? Why did Gou still choose to protect him? Yes, Gou was willing to sacrifice his own life for a friend, because to Gou, Dongzi was his friend. Even after discovering that Dongzi was an undercover police officer, it didn't matter. What mattered was the bond they had built. What mattered was loyalty. Gou still chose to protect Dongzi, even if it meant putting his own life on the line. Finished. The moral lesson from the friendship between Gou and Dongzi is that loyalty and trust don't always arise in perfect places. In fact, often, the most genuine connections can form in the midst of chaos and hardship. True friendship isn't measured by how long we've known each other, but by how strong we are in standing by each other, even when the world tries to tear us apart. Sometimes, the truest bonds are formed through sacrifice, understanding, and unwavering support. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Thank you.